Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Remy could still hear Deacon's words in his mind, sharp and unyielding, like a dagger slashing through the twilight silence. "Keep away from my son." The words were shouted with such fury, such raw rage, that they seemed to stay in the air long after Deacon slammed the door shut, leaving Remy standing alone on the broken pavement outside the small suburban house. The streetlights flickered, sending long, swaying shadows across the lawn, and Remy's breath caught as he struggled to steady himself. His hands trembled, not from the crisp autumn air, but from the enormity of what had just occurred. He knew this moment was coming, but nothing could have prepared him for the hatred in Deacon's eyes, or the way his face twisted with contempt when he caught Remy and Deke together. Remy moved slowly down the street, his sneakers scuffing against the asphalt. The neighborhood was calm, the type of place where families met for barbecues and children rode their bikes until the sun went down. It was the kind of place Remy had always wanted to belong to, a far cry from the cramped flat he'd grown up in, with thin walls and loud arguments. However, standing on the boundaries of Deke's universe, he felt like an invader, an outcast. The recollection of Deke's hand in his, warm and steady only minutes before Deacon stormed into the room, felt like a cruel tease now, a momentary sight of something he would never truly have. Deke had been unlike anyone Remy had ever met. They'd met at the community college, in a literary class neither of them had anticipated enjoying. Remy was there on scholarship, putting up a future he didn't think he deserved. Deke, with his easy smile and quiet assurance, appeared to fit in everywhere he went. He was the type of person who could make anyone feel seen, and when he focused on Remy, it felt like the sun bursting through a storm. They had started off as friends, exchanging notes and laughing over awful coffee at the college cafe. But over time, something had changed. A touch of fingertips, a lingering glance, and a moment of quiet spoke volumes. Remy was already in deep by the time they declared their feelings. He adored Deke. He hadn't stated it aloud, not in those precise words, but he knew it with every fiber of his being. It was in the way his heart raced when Deke laughed, and in how he found himself smiling at the thought of him even at the most boring moments of the day. But suddenly it felt like everything was slipping away, torn apart by Deacon's wrath and the reality of a society that didn't always allow for love like theirs. Remy paused at the park's edge, falling into a bench beneath a gnarled oak tree. The leaves were turning, their edges tinted with red and gold, and the air had a slight fragrance of damp dirt. He tightened his jacket over himself, attempting to remove the vision of Deacon's face from his memory. Deke's father was not a particularly cruel man. Remy had seen him at the college's family day, joking with Deke's younger sister while assisting her with a scientific project. He seemed like a kind dad back then, the type who would grill burgers and tell stupid jokes. But tonight, that man had been replaced by someone completely different, someone who regarded Remy as a threat, a danger to his son. Remy's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he took it out, his heart racing at the sight of Deke's name on the screen. The message was brief. "I apologize. I will talk to him. Please do not give up on us." Remy's throat clenched as he read it, his fingers lingering on the keyboard. He tried to type something brave or encouraging, but all he could think about was Deacon's expression. The hatred, the fear. It wasn't just Remy. It was all he represented, everything Deacon refused to embrace. He typed one reply, deleted it, and then typed another. "I am not giving up. I only need time." He pressed send before he could overthink it, then pushed the phone back into his pocket. The park was now vacant, with the swings squeaking slightly in the breeze. Remy reclined back, looking up at the sky, where the stars were partially obscured by clouds. He imagined what it would be like to live in a world where he didn't have to struggle for every shred of enjoyment, and love wasn't a battleground. Deke sat on the side of his bed, the room black, but for the dim glimmer from his phone. His father's remarks were still echoing in his ears, a constant pounding of rage and disappointment. "He isn't right for you, Deke. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." Deacon paced the living room, his voice rising with each statement, as if shouting might shut out the reality. Deke had attempted to reason and explain, but his father had not listened. He had never seen him like this before, so uncompromising and scared. Deke's hands were curled in fists, his claws driving into his palms. He wasn't furious with his father, exactly. He was furious at the situation and how the world appeared determined to tear him and Remy away. He knew his father would struggle with this. He grew up in a tiny town with traditional values, but Deke had thought, perhaps naively, that love would be enough to bridge the gap. He had been wrong. He imagined Remy, out there somewhere in the darkness, bearing the weight of his father's rejection. Deke could see the pain in Remy's eyes when Deacon stormed in, and how his shoulders dropped as he departed. It was unfair. Remy deserved better than to be viewed as a problem to be solved. Deke wanted to run after him, draw him close, and promise him everything would be well, but he wasn't sure he could maintain that promise. Not yet. He could hear his father moving around, the clink of dishes in the sink, and the faint hum of the television. His mother had remained silent during the fight, her face a mask of dread. She'd always been the peacemaker, smoothing things up, but today she'd remained silent, her hands twitching in her lap. Deke wondered what she was thinking, if she was as scared as his father or simply didn't know how to traverse this unfamiliar ground. He took up his phone again and reread Remy's message. "I am not giving up. I only need time." The words gave him a glimmer of hope, but they also held a weight he couldn't shake. Time. How long would it take for his father to come around? For the world to catch up? Deke wasn't sure, but he wasn't ready to let go of Remy. Not now. Not ever. The following few days were a haze of strain and evasion. Deke's house felt like a minefield, and every talk with his father was tinged with implicit hostility. Deacon didn't mention Remy again, but his silence spoke more than words. He would occasionally look at Deke, his eyes searching for the son he believed he knew. Deke despised the look. It made him feel as if he was disappearing in pieces. Meanwhile, Remy immersed himself in his studies, spending long hours in the library to avoid thinking about the agony in his chest. He spotted Deke in class and they exchanged modest, cautious smiles, but it wasn't the same. Deacon's comments had created a distance and a shadow. Remy wanted to think they could overcome this, that love would suffice, but uncertainty gnawed at him. What if Deke decides it's too hard? What if he took the easy way, one that did not involve fighting his father or facing the world's judgment? One evening, Remy returned to the park and sat on the same bench under the oak tree. The air was colder now, the leaves had virtually vanished, and the sky was a deep, endless gray. He'd been avoiding Deke's texts, not because he didn't want to communicate, but because he was worried about what might happen next. What if Deke asked him to wait indefinitely? What if he told him to walk away? He was so deep in contemplation that he didn't notice the footsteps until Deke was standing in front of him, his breath evident in the cold air. "Hey," Deke replied gently, his hands jammed into his jacket's pockets. "Can I sit?" Remy nodded and scooted over to make way. For a moment, they sat in quiet, the weight of everything unspoken weighing down on them. Finally, Deke spoke, his voice low and steady. "I'm sad about my father. He's terrified, I believe." Remy looked at the ground, his fingertips tracing the edge of the bench. "He hates me," he added quietly. "He thinks I'm going to ruin your life." "He's wrong," Deke stated firmly, turning to face him. "He does not know you. He doesn't recognize us. I'm not going to let him decide who I love." Remy's heart stuttered at the word love, but he couldn't bring himself to look Deke in the eyes. "It's not just him," he explained. "It's everything. The way others look at us. What they say. I'm not sure whether I'm strong enough for that." Deke put out his hand, his fingers warm despite the cold. "You don't have to be strong alone," he told me. "We'll do this together. I know it's difficult, but I won't give up on you, Remy." Remy's eyes welled up with tears, which he blinked away, his attention drawn to the sensation of Deke's hand in his. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of optimism, fragile but genuine. Perhaps they can get through this. Maybe love is enough. Weeks stretched into months, and the journey was not easy. Deacon didn't quite come around, but he did stop shouting. He began to listen gradually as Deacon revealed aspects of his life with Remy, stories of late-night study sessions, quiet moments in the park, and how Remy's laugh could brighten even the darkest days. Remy, for his part, tried to be patient, giving Deacon time to recognize him as more than a threat. It wasn't ideal, but it represented development. They also faced other problems, such as whispers in the halls, judgmental looks from strangers, and the weight of a world that did not always comprehend. But they confronted them together, hand in hand, drawing courage from one another. Remy learned to rely on Deacon, to believe that he was not alone in this fight. And Deacon learned to stand up for what he believed in, even if it meant going against his father. One spring evening, when the first buds blossomed on the park's oak tree, Remy and Deacon sat on their seat, watching the sunset paint the sky in pink and gold. They did not need to say much. The silence between them was now comfortable, filled with the type of understanding that can only come from working through a storm together. "I love you," Remy whispered quietly before he could stop himself. Deacon turned to face him, his eyes sparkling. "I love you too," he responded, and the words felt like a promise, to keep fighting and loving no matter what the world threw at them. Remy knew they'd be okay in that moment, under the fading light of the sunset. Not ideal, not simple, but acceptable. Because they had each other, and that was plenty. Deacon's hands trembled as he stormed into the living room. His chest felt like it was on fire, and the combination of incredulity and wrath made it difficult for him to think clearly. The text message that had shown on his phone 30 minutes ago was still fresh in his mind. "Stay away from my son." He didn't even need to look up who had sent it. The tone was apparent, the words purposeful, crisp, and full of warning. It was from Remy, and the message was intended to get right to the heart of the matter. Deacon had suspected something was wrong for weeks, but he hadn't anticipated the encounter to occur so brutally, publicly, and via a text that demanded space. Deacon sat on the couch, his stance stiff, shoulders hunched, and eyes darting to the door as Deacon moved his weight. There was no denying it now. Remy was Deacon's boyfriend. Deacon's mind replayed the minor interactions he had previously ignored. The way Deacon's smile remained just a little longer when Remy was present, the silent way he would check at his phone when a message arrived, and the subtle blush that would appear on his cheeks in Remy's presence. Deacon had noticed, of course, but he had convinced himself that it was just a harmless relationship. And now it isn't. How long? Deacon's voice was low and strained, almost growling. His fingers grasped the edge of the armchair as if it could keep him from exploding. Deacon paused. His gaze shifted between his father and the floor, as if looking for the appropriate words in the cracks of the hardwood. "A few months," he said finally. "Since March." Deacon's jaw stiffened. March. That meant it had been going on for nearly half a year, without his knowledge. For half a year, his own kid had kept a secret that, when exposed, felt like a betrayal. Deacon had always prided himself on knowing Deacon and understanding him in ways no one else could. Yet here he was, taken aback, greeted not by a conversation but by a text packed with possessive emotion from a stranger who had become significant in his son's life. "Why haven't you told me?" Deacon's voice cracked, full of hurt and hatred. He paced the room, fingers ripping through his hair. "Deacon, I raised you. I assumed we trusted each other." Deacon shuffled uncomfortably, his hands gripped tightly in his lap. "I didn't know how," he said gently. I thought you might not accept it." Deacon paused in his steps. He blinked quickly, attempting to digest the words. His thoughts alternated between wrath and shame. How could he have made Deacon feel as though he couldn't discuss this? Nonetheless, the intensity of the immediate reaction, the letter, the warning, the rage, made it nearly hard to reason coherently. Deacon felt his world shrinking, everything outside this room vanishing as his emotions boiled. "You thought I wouldn't accept it?" Deacon repeated, his voice trembling in amazement. "I'm your father. I love you. Always have." Yet, he hesitated, taking a deep breath, fighting to keep his composure. "Remy? Deacon, he is not just anyone. I know him, and I don't trust him." Deacon lifted his head slightly, his gaze sharpening. "You don't trust him because he is my boyfriend?" His voice was measured, but there was a sting, a combination of hurt and defiance. Is that really what you mean, or is it just that he's not the person you wanted me to be with? Deacon froze, the words hitting him harder than he anticipated. They were definitely true. Part of his rage sprang from fear, from the desire to protect his son. But another part, he hated to admit, stemmed from his own expectations, his strict views about who Deke should be engaged with. "It's not about what I want," Deacon muttered, attempting to control his voice. Deke snorted. "It's about what's safe, what's right." "Right for whom? You or I? Because right now, it sounds like you're terrified. Scared that I'm happy without your consent, that I'm making decisions you didn't intend." Deacon's chest clenched. He despised the idea that his own son perceived him as dominating, but he couldn't deny it either. The truth was that Remy had arrived, smiling, confident, and completely capable of instilling emotions in Deke that Deacon had never imagined for anyone else. Yes, Deacon's protective instincts erupted like wildfire in his chest. But it was more than that. It was a confrontation with the unknown, with change, and with losing control of the story he felt he had created for his family. "You don't understand him," Deacon eventually stated, his voice falling but not softening. "You don't know what he's capable of." Deke leaned back, his arms crossed. "I know him better than you realize. He treats me wonderfully. He makes me joyful. Isn't this enough?" Deacon's hands fell to his sides. He ran a palm over his face, his rage and frustration dragging him down. "It's not only about happiness, Deke. It's about safety and trust. I can't just let anyone, into your life without understanding their intentions." Deke's expression tightened. "So, that's why you sent the text." He motioned toward Deacon's phone, the words still fresh in his mind. "Stay away from my son? Is it the way a parent expresses concern?" The words hit harder than anything else. Deacon experienced a pang of humiliation, nearly a physical anguish. He had tried to protect, to demonstrate his authority, but the message was harsh, accusing, and almost violent in its finality. It was not how he wanted to communicate with his child, but the fire of his emotions had overcome his better judgment. "I didn't know what else to say," he said, his voice shaking. "I was scared and acted without thinking," Deke said, his gaze softening slightly, but remaining watchful. "Scared of what? That I would make my own decisions? Would I be content without your approval? Would you have to let go?" Deacon did not respond promptly. He wanted to, but the truth weighed more than words. The worry wasn't limited to Remy. It was about losing a sense of certainty and control over a life he had shaped. It was about confronting the fact that Deke was maturing, making decisions, and developing relationships that were not centered on him, and that revelation cut worse than any rage could. "I want what's best for you," Deacon murmured finally, his voice calmer and less booming. Deke shook his head, a slight smile tugging at the edges of his mouth. I don't know if he is that. Maybe you don't, but I do. And maybe you'll get there too." Deacon glanced at him, his heart racing. He wanted to fight, to demand more time, more evidence of Remy's worth, but Deke's determination was unwavering. He saw his own stubbornness reflected back at him, the same tenacity he had shown at Deke's age. It was simultaneously furious and humbling. "I need to meet him," Deacon finally stated, his tone indicating a capitulation. "I need to see for myself." Deke's eyes widened with relief, but he didn't fully smile. "You can meet him, but understand this, Dad. I am no longer hiding. I'm not faking. He's a part of my life, whether you like it or not." Deacon breathed gently, the tension leaving him in a rush of air. He had been preparing for a battle, for confrontation, for words as sharp as knives, but the truth was more nuanced than wrath. It was about learning to let go, adjusting, and reframing love in light of adulthood, independence, and choice. Later that evening, Deacon found himself sitting alone in his study, staring at the phone once more, the words, "Stay away from my son," still plaguing him. They were more than just Remy's message. They were a mirror of his own worries and failures as a father navigating his son's life. Anger, he realized, had blinded him to Deke's happiness and confused his judgment, and he needed to find a way to stand back, breathe, and allow the relationship to evolve on its own. Hours passed in silent reflection. He remembered Deke as a young boy, running about the yard, laughing, climbing trees, and asking countless questions about the universe. He reflected on the late nights they'd spent talking and the promises he'd made to always protect and guide him. He learned that protection did not imply control. Guidance did not imply prescribing the route. Love, especially unconditional love, requires learning to let go when required. When Deke returned home that night, Deacon was waiting for him, and he felt a sense of serenity that he hadn't felt in hours. "I want to meet him," he stated with a firm voice. "I need to understand him, not only for my own peace of mind, but also for you. But we do it together. No more secrets or messages. We chat. We're listening. We try." Deke nodded, relief and appreciation spreading across his face.
Deal.
The tension didn't go away altogether. It lingered, a reminder of the fragile nature of trust, the difficulty of acceptance, and the effort required to traverse the complexity of family, love, and choice. For the first time that day, Deacon sensed a glimmer of hope. He recognized that, while anger could ignite, love, true, patient, abiding love, could guide, heal, and help him see past fear to understanding. Deacon considered the future as the night grew darker and the home became quieter. There would be hurdles, confrontations, and periods of uncertainty. But there would also be growth, laughter, and a gradual, steady buildup of trust. And perhaps, over time, he would come to regard Remy not as a threat or a source of fear, but as someone who made his kid happy, someone who deserved to be known, fairly judged, and eventually welcomed.